Hey there. Welcome to Unmuted Voices, where we dive into real stories behind why we stay silent, how we reclaim our voice, and what it truly means to speak with confidence. I'm Aisha, founder and chief communication coach at Start in the Beginning, and a longtime research executive. I have spent years helping people and companies find their voice, and even now, I'm still learning to use mine more boldly. I'm so glad you're here. Today's episode is about tackling accent bias. Did you hear what I said or how I said it? Our goal is to provide an honest, empowering conversation about how accent bias impacts communication, leadership, and everyday interactions with real world takeaways for you, our listeners. Today's guest is perfect for this discussion. Meet Jhon Cardona, an educator, writer, and bridge builder across languages and cultures. Jhon is an adjunct instructor at Rhode Island College's ESL intensive program and has been teaching English as a second language for nearly 20 years, both here in the US and in his native Colombia. He also teaches at Rhode Island College's Workforce Development Hub, contributes as a translator and writer for the Office of College Communications, and teaches introductory Spanish at Salve Regina University. Jhon, we are so glad to have you with us. Welcome to Unmuted Voices.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited.
Yeah, let's get into it. So let's start with your personal journey. Who we are at our core, the way we grew up, the messages we absorb early on, all of that deeply shapes how we show up later in life, especially when it comes to our voice. So, to begin, I'd love to hear more about you. Tell us a bit about your background, Jhon, and how you grew up, and through the lens of someone who teaches language and understands its nuances deeply, what has your journey taught you about the power and challenges of voice?
So, I'm Colombian, as you just said it. I was born and raised in Colombia. And when I was 13 years old, we moved out of the country to a country where the language was different, was English. So, for 5 years, I was there. I kind of learned English in the last 3 years. I feel like the first 2 years were just like a little bit of getting into the culture and getting into how to live there and how to move around. But by 18, I moved back to Colombia. My family stayed, and I went back to Colombia because I wanted to go to college. Ever since I was 5 years old, I wanted to be a doctor, and I always said it. But when I got to Colombia, for some reason, I started teaching. I was 19 years old, and I started teaching ESL classes. I remember when the time came to start college, I was sure that that would be something nice to do, teach English, teach Spanish. So I went to college to become a language teacher. And I can't believe it's almost 20 years. 20 years. I feel like being a teacher, a language teacher, and my whole journey has taught me voice is far more than spoken words. Is the is the unique way individuals connect with the world and show their identity. I feel like I have experienced how my students, especially, empower themselves using their voice. It's nice to hear them come to me when we have classes. After several weeks, they just come to me and they express how they're able to communicate with their children's teacher, talk to people at a market, or order food at a restaurant. uh, their stories are endless, and and that's pretty exciting, and it's pretty, it warms my heart to hear them say that. um, I feel those experiences are building their confidence, and it's definitely allowing them to express themselves. There's always obstacles, language barriers, cultural taboos, internal fear, lack of access. And as a teacher, I consider I am not only there to teach grammar and vocabulary, but also to teach my students to have courage and authenticity. Um, when I talk to my students about these specific subjects, most of my students are Latinos. I would say at least 85 to 90% of my students are Latinos in each class I teach, uh, ESL class, I mean. And they agree that we as Latinos grew up with a lot of fear. And it seems like it's part of who we are. Uh, and the most common fear I hear is accent. I think we need to let go of that idea. Uh, Fear cannot rule how we express ourselves. I used to think that losing my accent was like the goal, and I realized with time that is not that. It's about ownership. You have to own your accent, and you have to help people understand you with your accent. It's part of who we are. It exists in every language. Teaching my students to accept their accent and see it as something natural is one of the most vital things I can do.
That is powerful. You came in so hot, John. Oh my goodness. All right, I've been taking notes furiously here because I'm being enriched by this conversation. There's so many things you've just mentioned, and I want to just connect the dots for our listeners. Uh, when you said voice is more than words, I think that's so powerful. It is. And we know there's words, and then there's, the body language, something like 80 something percent of communication is just sort of your body language. But then you said something else sort of, really powerful, which is this notion about language as a tool to connect, and language is a tool to grow. Language is a tool to experience new things. I love your elation when your students come to you and have experienced new things, because you gave them the words, the language, the tools to do so. And then you mentioned this idea about courage and authenticity being a key part of how you teach and what you imbue your lessons with. I think that's incredible. We're going to get deeper into this idea of accent, because this statement, I used to think the goal was to get rid of it, is so, so powerful. And now it's more about ownership. I can't wait to hear more about this. Thank you for that lovely introduction into who you are. As you are continuing to shape your view and your style of communication and leadership, I'd love to just understand more about how your experience as an immigrant, as a bilingual and multilingual person, has shaped that view of what communication and leadership style ought to look like.
Empathy, connection, cultural awareness. Um, I heard someone say it, and that was recently, be more mindful of how messages are received, not just how they are delivered.
Mm.
Um, I learned to pay attention to the tone, cultural context, nonverbal cues. Uh, those are as important as words themselves. Being bilingual, being bilingual teaches you that words carry different meanings depending on the context, depending on the culture. Um, it helps understand and recognize the importance of listening, not just to respond, but to understand, especially across cultural boundaries, right? Speaking two languages has helped me become more inclusive, adaptable. It allows me to connect with people from different backgrounds. Um, it builds trust. If if I can understand where the other person is from, it can help me understand and appreciate the diverse perspectives. I feel like what I learned today, especially about my students, what I learned today about them and their culture is going to be helpful for future experiences when I teach
Mhm.
students from that same background, right?
Yeah.
Language is cultural. Spanish and English, in my case, are always in my head all the time, and they're
Mhm.
right there, and they mix, right? And there are things you can say in Spanish that are hard to find uh,
Mm.
a translation or a phrase in English, right? And vice versa. For example, I was just recently teaching a friend the word amaneciste, which we
Mm.
in Colombia we use it a lot. And amaneciste is like amanecer is like um, when the sun's coming up. I,
Mhm.
word, I forgot the word. uh,
It
dawn,
happens.
dawn,
You
right?
just said it. There's two languages happening in your head all the time.
So when you say "Cómo amaneciste," asking someone in the morning "Cómo amaneciste" is not just about how do you sleep, but it's how do you sleep? How are you feeling today? If you were sick the night before and I ask you "Cómo amaneciste," is are you feeling better today? "Cómo
Mhm.
amaneciste" means are you in a good mood? Are you feeling positive? Like it is just in one small question of two sentences, you're asking all of these other things. And there's no phrase, there's no words in English you can use to say that word, amaneciste. I feel like every language has its own words or phrases that are culturally understood.
Yes, absolutely. Oh my goodness. Amaneciste. I am, say it for me one more time.
Amaneciste.
Ama, amanecis.
Mhm. Te.
Amanecis. I love it. I love it. Thank you. I love that idea of it's not always that there's sort of this one-to-one exchange when it comes to language. I was speaking with someone yesterday, and we were talking about, and we're both bilingual, me from West Africa, him from East Africa. And I don't even know how this came up, but we just started talking about how many different words there are in the English language for laughing, and how I think in our language there's two. In English, there's
Ah,
like chuckle, chortle, snicker, laugh. There's so many different words for different ways of laughing. And I don't even know how this came about. But, to your idea, this sort of really deep concept does not necessarily translate. You'd have to ask 17 different questions to get the same essence in the English language. And the same goes the other way as well. There are some things that are deeply rich, deeply descriptive, and includes so many other definitions in the English language that you won't find in other languages as well. So I really love that. And I love this notion of being mindful of reception and of how you're heard rather than just sort of what you're saying. There is research to back up everything that you've said with regards to how understanding, speaking, learning another language increases human empathy. It's a very real thing. So thank you for surfacing that. I think it's really interesting that you mentioned that piece in particular, that element of human empathy, that element of sort of higher emotional intelligence, because sometimes people misinterpret accents as less intelligent, or as more intelligent. There's a lot of people who will hear the British accent and think, oh, that sounds so elevated and posh and smart, you know? And then you come from like the deep south and there are misconceptions about how that sounds the complete opposite. Lazy even, right? All of these kind of misconceptions. So as you think about that, what is one misconception, one common misconception people have about accents and intelligence as it relates to professionalism?
So I want to say, what is accent, right? So accent is a distinctive way of pronunciation, right, of any language, and is especially associated with a particular nation or locality or social class. And that's funny, social class. It's funny how in my city everybody kind of speaks the same way, but depending, right, social class, you
Mhm.
say your accent is different. But this particular actor, she's Colombian, Sofia Vergara. I don't know if you heard of her,
Mhm.
right?
Yes.
She's very famous, and I will say she's very famous because of her thick accent, right? She's been living in the United States for almost 3 decades. I think over 3 decades. So I remember in several interviews, she said that she worked very hard to lose her accent, and she took classes and she did everything she could to do that. And one day she realized I cannot lose my accent, so I have to embrace it, right? So instead of fighting it, she used it to her advantage. And soon after, Modern Family producers called her and said, "We have a character for you, and we grow specifically for you because we want this person to have, right, your accent." And she became very famous with Modern Family. I heard once that she was the best well-paid actor in sitcom.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And on an episode, she is talking to her kid and her husband, and she says, "Do you even know how smart I am in Spanish?" She was very frustrated. And I don't think she was talking specifically about accent, but about how hard it is for some people to speak two languages, right? Because they're always there, and then you forget things, and then you have to translate in your head, right? Um, and sometimes that whatever you want to say might get lost in the translation, and that makes you sound like, oh, you're not smart enough or good enough for a position, right? And that's sad. But although her character at first seems she's a little dumb,
Hmm.
after you watch several episodes, you get to understand that she is not. That she's very smart. That she responds to others in the show, and you can see that she is smart. She's a smart woman, um, and then she reveals her intelligence. Right. Um, I feel like this seeing her shows how important it is not to judge at first impressions. Sometimes it's important to give people the chance to show who they really are.
Hmm. Mm, that is powerful. And I love, love, love the Sofia Vergara like reference because I often thought to myself when I would see it, and I didn't watch it religiously, I would just watch snippets.
Mhm.
And you've enlightened me, and I think a lot of people as well, because if you watch snippets, all you notice is why are they using her accent as a comedic shtick? Why is it always the comedic relief here? There's almost this sort of underlying notion that it's somehow she's less serious just because of the accent. But you're saying, no, if you stick around long enough and you don't just prejudge, you'll see how deeply intelligent she is. And she shows this through this character. So I, you know, I'm realizing that I even fell prey, though I was on the other side of the like, more angry and outraged that a Colombian accent could be used as just comedic shtick. You're teaching me and many other people to just pause and keep observing and then see for yourself. That's really powerful. So, if we think about the Sofia Vergara model, right, of being your authentic self, and you mentioned she went through this arc of wanting to lose it and then saying, this is not going to happen. I'm just going to accept it. And when she did, magnificent things begin to happen. As you think about your students, you talked about how passionate you are about the way that you teach them. How do you encourage them to embrace their authentic voice, especially when they fear being judged for how they speak, right? They're not on a platform where their job is to make people laugh and entertain. They're in professional settings, they're in school, they really want to succeed. So the level of pressure might be a bit different. How do you encourage them to embrace that authentic voice?
So I feel like examples help us understand a lot. So when in class, and usually the first week of class, the first 2 days of class, I tell my students, I'm Colombian. In Colombia, we have 12 different accents because of the different regions we have, right? And then in the world, there's 21 countries um, where the official language is Spanish. Actually, one of those countries is in Africa.
How many? You said 21?
21,
21. Okay.
and one is in Africa. You usually wouldn't think in Africa, Spanish speaking country. And yes, Equatorial Guinea, the Spanish is one of the official languages, and many people don't know that, right? So each country has a special accent, right? And that special accent is recognized everywhere, right? And like Colombia, particularly, people will say, "Oh, you have to speak like with this accent that goes up," and there's a specific one everybody recognizes. And if you don't have that accent, they don't think you're from Colombia. 12 different ones, right? So, for example, Caribbeans, people from Spanish speaking Caribbean countries, Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, Cuba, um, this accent they have is very similar to some people in Colombia in the coast, the north part of Colombia, the coast side. People speak very similar. So if you hear someone from that part of Colombia, you might think they're from the Dominican Republic or from any of those Caribbean countries. People from the south of Colombia, they speak different. My mom is from the south of Colombia, and if they speak, you can think they're, if you find them here in the States, right, or any other country that is not Colombia, you might think they're from Ecuador or maybe from Peru, Bolivia, or from Guatemala. So our beautiful language and this particular south of Colombia accent, it comes from the indigenous people,
Mm.
are beautiful indigenous people. My mom is indigenous. I'm part indigenous, right? So I tell my students to reconsider if they have an accent in their own languages. Like what make I tell them like what makes you believe that there's no accent for English speakers, right? There's accent is part of languages. It's everywhere here in the States, and something that's close to us is that in Boston people don't pronounce the R, right? In New York City the O sounds sometimes like ah, right? And people, many people don't say the car, right? Or the apple, the apple. So those are accents. Those are ways to say words differently. I give examples in class, and these specific examples, and I feel like my students look like, oh, they're relieved.
Mhm.
It helps them. It helps them understand accent is part of who we are
That's right.
and where we come from.
Absolutely. And there's so much richness in that, as you mentioned, some of the accent coming from the indigenous people. I mean, we're talking about hundreds of years of history trickling down a lineage to your mother and now to you and to future generations. It's a beautiful thing. And I love that you empower your students in that way to think outside of themselves for a moment, because we tend to be very focused on what's going on in our own psyches to say, hey, look at the outside world. Everybody has an accent. You go to
Mhm.
California, you're going to sound crazy if you're from New York, and vice versa. So embracing it, knowing that it's a part of your history, if I'm understanding it correctly, is a beautiful way of shifting a mindset. What do you say to someone, though, who says, okay, great, professor, love that, but it's about my English itself. I'm struggling to feel confident speaking English as an additional language. I can come to terms with the accent thing. What advice would you give to that person struggling to feel confident speaking English as an additional language?
I believe our mindset has to do a lot with how we learn.
Mm,
Um, so I tell my students, stop thinking that you can't. There's a saying in English: if you think you can, you can. If you think you can't, you're right. Right?
mhm,
You say I cannot do something. Yeah, you cannot do that. But if you, right, if you force yourself to do it, so um, advices. Okay, start speaking to people you trust,
mhm,
family members, friends. I think taking a class. let's say this is number two. Taking a class, being in a classroom is important because you relate to other to your classmates, right? You can relate to each other. You are there to learn. All of us are there to learn because as a teacher, I'm learning too, right? It's a new language. I don't know everything. There's many things I still learning from this language in particular. So I feel like that supportive environment helps create trust um, towards each other and
Hmm.
feel a bit more confident.
Yeah.
Another advice, mm, I try to put my students in situations where they have to speak about themselves, right? And they have to do it in front of the whole classroom. So we have presentations, and like some of my classes are 10 weeks, and throughout the 10 weeks they have three presentations,
Hmm.
and that force force them to grow confidence because confidence grows with practice. That's how it is, right? The more you practice, the better you get. Another one would be, well, you don't need to be perfect with your grammar or have a native accent to be
Hmm.
understood. It's okay to make mistakes. Mistakes are normal. They're
That's right.
the normal part of learning.
Hmm.
We'll say practice in daily situations. Put yourself there, ordering food. I tell them to change everything on their phone just to English and use their GPS going home because they know how to
Mm.
get there, but they're listening to this person telling them like take a right, go straight in 2 miles you're gonna take XC20, whatever. So that's important. Maybe put yourself in situations where you are familiar with, but listening to those in English. I tell them to use online games. I love online games, and we always do it.
Mm.
First thing, first thing we do as a warm up activity is online games, and you can use your phone. I'm waiting in an appointment 10 minutes. I can use my phone, right? Um, Listen to music. Everybody says that, and if you're listening to music you like, right, that helps. It helps a
Yeah.
lot. And watch shows in English,
Hmm.
right? Series, movies. I also like to tell my students to evaluate yourself when we start class. Before they start class they take a test, um, so they know like what level they are. And when
Hmm.
we're ending the class, the last week of class, they take the same, I think it's the same test, so they can see how much they've grown, and they can notice, yeah, their improvement.
Yes.
And definitely one last thing, it's okay in every situation, it's okay to be nervous.
Hmm.
Confidence comes from action.
That's right. Yeah, that's so powerful. There's so many wonderful things you just mentioned here, and I won't do justice to recap all of them, but I think some really, really powerful ones amongst some fantastic advice, talking to people that you trust, that you know are not going to be there to judge you and every little grammar mistake that you make so that you can build comfort. But there's all of these factors that help build your confidence, from the immersion that you talked about, immersion in things that you actually already like and do day to day, from watching shows to online gaming to setting your directions in English just so that you can create that mental map between what you know and what you're learning. I think that's so fantastic. And then learning to sort of speak about yourself in front of people as a forcing function to build exercise. And as you said, confidence is just a practice. It's just doing the thing over and over and then knowing that you can. It's as simple as that. That is fantastic, fantastic advice for people for whom the language itself is the barrier, even if they can get over the accent bias and some of the fears around accent insecurity. And so it's wonderful. You have learned all of these things yourself, right? Was there a turning point for you where you decided to unmute yourself despite biases?
Yes. So it was a couple years ago. Um, I had been in therapy, so I came to the United States 7 years ago.
Hmm.
I I had I was trying therapy to feel better about the culture and adapting, but it was tough. It was tough to go out and socialize, talk to people out of nowhere. Like something that I will do in Colombia, something that I will do easily in Spanish, I couldn't do in English, right? So I
Mm,
talked to my doctor, and he recommended taking medicine. This medicine is specifically seasonal depression or seasonal affective disorder. Um, and when I started taking that medicine, a few days after, I started feeling like myself. Like I was able to go in public places and talk to strangers, and like just ask any questions and start a conversation. Before that, it was not possible. And I'm not saying this will work for everyone. Maybe just therapy works for you. Maybe just you are confident enough to put yourself in those situations and right, work with that. But for me, it was not. I tried, and it was hard. So
mm,
I got tired of letting fear control me, and medication helped in this situation. So it's still a work in process. Every day I remind myself of who I am, how hard I've worked to be where I am, and how far I've gotten, right?
yeah,
So I feel like as long as there's discrimination and biases, we will have to unmute ourselves constantly.
yeah.
There might be times when we really have to do it. Other times we don't. We don't really have to. The thing is that we unmute ourselves because we want to be heard, and we are going to feel good about doing it, right?
Hmm.
Not just because someone else is telling you you have to do it.
I just want to let that linger because that's so powerful. Thank you for sharing that. I That moves me as I'm listening to it because it does have to be self-driven. You do have to see value in unmuting yourself and understand the value and power in your own voice. But if you're stuck, find a way to get unstuck. For you, it was therapy. For you, it might have been the extra step of taking medication. For someone else, it's something entirely different, but you took that step is the difference.
Yes.
And I think that's really powerful, something to leave with our listeners. So, if you could leave our listeners with just one final thought, I just want to squeeze one more drop of lemon from you. One thought about owning their authentic voice, what would it be?
I've had conversations about this topic, and people say they are not biased, but the truth is that we all are. We all have biases, right? People could say, I don't care about your accent. I don't care about your nationality. I don't care about anything else. But we all have something called implicit bias. These are subconscious information that we gather from people around us, right? Mostly while we're growing up.
Mm,
I feel like those prejudices, stereotypes, however you call it, attitudes or feelings are in the back of your brain, and they come out when you least expect them. So in group conversations, I feel like, yeah, in group conversations sometimes I say something and I don't feel like I get the approval, but then someone else says the same thing. Someone else who doesn't does not have an accent like mine or do not look like me, and they say the exact same thing, and they get validation, they get approval, and that makes you feel a little um, what's the word? I don't want to say upset, but it shakes you a little bit, right? Uh,
Hmm.
but then I understand that it's not because people are mean or bad people that they didn't approve of what I said, but it's because of those implicit biases. They block our conscious minds, right?
100%.
They block our listening to what the other person is really saying, right? Oh, the accent, I don't know. And maybe they concentrate on the accent instead of really listening to what the person is saying. Um, and I feel like it is important to recognize that we all are biased. And the beauty of recognizing you do have them and that other people do as well, right? Will help you feel less threatened and don't take it personal.
Mm.
I feel recognizing that help us work on ourselves. Um, and who knows what maybe when we know we have them and they're trying to come out, we just hold them back, right?
Yeah.
It's a change of our mindsets, um,
Hmm.
the way we think, the way we see things. It's hard. It's hard to change, but not impossible.
It's hard to change, but not impossible. We all have biases. You hear it from John. It could be across accent, race, a number of different dimensions, but we all have them. And acknowledging that is a survival tool. Not only does it take the pressure off of you, it seems is what I'm understanding from you, but also, expands your heart, expands your chest to empathy for, I think you mentioned, this idea that it just is easier sometimes for people to tune out. It's not because they're bad people. And there's research to back that, like we're wired as human beings for cognitive ease. We just want things to happen easily and process information. And anything that overloads us, they call it cognitive load. And then all of a sudden you're tuning something out because it's harder for you to process it. But that's a really powerful thought. We all have bias. Don't take it personally. And it may be personal at times. I just want to add that. But don't take it personally as a survival tool for yourself. It doesn't serve you to take it personally and embed yourself in anger and frustration.
Mhm.
Oh, John, thank you so, so very much for this powerful, heartfelt, enriching conversation. Tell the people where they can find and follow your work.
So I write for Rhode Island College News. So you just go to rick.edu and you can find my work there. We have it in English and some of them in Spanish. And there's a Hispanic newspaper that every month, and I thank them a lot, American News NE, New England. And American News, they publish the Spanish versions of the articles we write at Rhode Island College because it's not only myself writing them, but it's my
Mm.
co-workers, Jeff and Gita. Um, and yeah, you can find me there.
We will have all of this information for you all in the show notes. Please follow John's work. If today's conversation with John helped you think differently about your voice, about how it's heard, how it's judged, and how it still belongs, that is a powerful mind shift. Accent bias isn't about how clearly we speak, it's about sometimes how narrowly we've been taught to listen. As John mentioned, sometimes it comes from childhood. And you don't have to erase your sound to be respected. We learned that in the ways in which he inspires his students. And you don't have to chase someone else's version of fluency or standard or normal to be taken seriously, as we learned from his example about Sofia Vergara. Your voice in all its texture, its rhythms, its history carries intelligence, it carries story, it carries strength. Thank you to John so much for sharing his wisdom and his heart so generously. And thank you all for tuning in. If this episode sparked something for you, come find us on Instagram and YouTube. We are building a space for conversations just like this, honest, reflective, and extremely brave. And we're thrilled to announce our upcoming book, Unmuted Voices: How We Hear Accents and Learn to Judge Differently. It tackles this very topic of accent bias that we've been talking with Jhon about. And I'm now wishing that he was a co author on this book. But we offer practical tools, reflection exercises, and the language to interrupt bias, shift the conversation, and build more inclusive communities. Details will be in the show notes. And if someone came to mind, someone who's been holding their voice back, someone who has just been struggling with language or accent, please send this their way. Jhon's insights could be incredibly helpful for them. Sometimes a reminder that we all need is you don't have to sound native or standard to speak with power. Next time, we are turning inward. We're talking about the voices in our heads and how internalized bias shapes what we believe about ourselves before we even open our mouths. Until then, your voice belongs here. We'll talk soon.